Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sleep Detective podcast. Today, I have my lovely client, Samantha, here to talk about her journey and experience working together and, where she started with sleep and where she is now and how she's feeling. So, Samantha, I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, Martha, for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, no problem. All right. So, let's just start talking about like when we first started working together, how were you sleeping?
I've had sleep issues for the better part of 10 years. They started out very minor, just a couple days here and there. I kind of noticed that it seemed to correlate with certain parts of my cycle, and I was also having other hormonal issues at the time. It wasn't super disruptive, but enough where I took notice. So I eventually went to a functional doctor who kind of confirmed it was a hormone related issue, gave me some supplements and different things to try, and it definitely helped. But like 8 or 9 months later, I was kind of back in the same spot, still having some sleep issues. Um, and like over time, things just got progressively worse. Like it went from a couple days a month to like 5 to 7 days a month to 10 days a month, and just progressively got worse. And yeah, I fell into this cycle of going back to the functional doctor. We would run tests. I would get supplements. They would kind of improve my symptoms a little bit, but then I would wind up right back in their office. And honestly, it went on like that for years. Just no real solutions, just kind of band-aid approaches. Um, but I was managing. It wasn't like so disruptive. But then the beginning part of last year, something switched and my sleep just became completely erratic. It didn't seem to revolve around my cycle at all. I would go several days in a row of zero sleep, which was new and also very scary. um, and yeah, I just noticed like even the days that I was sleeping, it was just very broken and not like deep, restful sleep. I also noticed my anxiety started to go through the roof. It was just a very steep decline. And it actually prompted me to take medical leave at my job because I worked at a hospital and I was working evenings and commuting, and I was worried I was going to like injure somebody or get into a car accident or something horrible would happen. Um, so I took medical leave. I went back to the functional doctor, um, you know, more tests, more supplements. And then finally, after a month, I was like, clearly this isn't working and I'm getting worse. And I just need to figure out what's going on because it doesn't seem to be related to my hormones anymore. There seemed to be something else going on that we weren't getting to the bottom to. And thankfully, I found your podcast and watched a lot of your videos, and it just seemed like you had the right approach for me. So that's where I was. And I was just in a very bad state, truly like the lowest point of my life, medically speaking. And it was just so disruptive. I couldn't even function at all. I couldn't work. I couldn't, I missed out on family events. It was a pretty bad spot to be in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I'm glad you're not there anymore. And, I think your story's similar to a lot of people I talk to and work with too, is, I talk to a lot of women who, it might seem like a hormonal issue, but it's always more than just hormones. So that is what we found with the other tests. Your hormones actually looked pretty good. And while it still seems like there's, somewhat of a hormonal component because things do change throughout your cycle, but there was other things going on as well that the test results showed that we did. So do you remember what they showed, like what was significant for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I felt that because had been dealing with these issues for so long that everything was probably out of whack. Like I had watched your podcast and I thought, oh, I probably have H. pylori and my cortisol is probably through the roof. I was convinced that I was going to be the worst case you'd ever see. But actually, like you said, like my hormones were fine and there was nothing like, no big flashing red light saying, oh, this is, we need to fix this. It was just kind of a pattern of like my body being depleted, like my the good bacteria in my gut was depleted and my minerals were depleted, and I think my cortisol was actually low at points in the day when it should have been higher. So it just kind of showed a pattern of, yeah, being depleted and just years of stress, just taking things away from my body, and I just wasn't replacing them, which was really surprising. And I was honestly kind of like skeptical after we got those results back, because I was like, how could I be feeling this bad when it's just like, low minerals and a few things here and there. It felt like it was like a needle in the haystack. Um, but of course, the tests don't lie, and your analysis was exactly right, thankfully. So
Yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, I've definitely, we see cases of all extremes. And so sometimes it's like someone has all these pathogens and heavy metals and like all these toxins, and yours was kind of the opposite of that. But it's amazing how significant that can be as well. But
yeah, truly, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But luckily, somewhat easier to fix than like trying to get rid of all these things that shouldn't be there. So yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I know you made some changes and took some supplements. Like what did you do and what do you think made the biggest difference?
Yeah, well, initially, I think before we even got the test results back, you had suggested some dietary changes. I was already not eating gluten, not eating dairy, that sort of thing. But I also cut out eggs because I was eating them like every day, and you said that they might be contributing to some like inflammation. Um, but yeah, really minor changes to start. And then you had recommended a few supplements. It wasn't even, I mean, I'd come from taking like 10, 11 supplements, with this other functional MD, and you had recommended like maybe there are 4 or 5 things I think we were focusing on, and we just added them in gradually. Um, so yeah, really minor changes. Like I don't think I really did much else. It was kind of just like being patient and trusting that these changes were going to over time make a difference.
Yeah. And I think I remember too, I recommended eating more protein and things like that to balance blood sugar. So yeah, so I do remember those diet changes too.
Mhm.
And I just love seeing your progress because it's not always like this, but you just kind of gradually got better over the months. Like you
Yeah.
started sleeping and feeling less anxious at first. And then I remember you were sleeping like 6 hours a night.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah. It went
yeah,
from like 4 to 5 to 6, but it did take time, which could be tough at times. And there were some setbacks, but it definitely was just a steady, increase in my sleep time and also the sleep quality I was getting. So I at least felt like we were on the right path and
yeah,
focusing on the right things.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And then I remember you got to where you were, where you're sleeping 7 to 8 hours, which was your goal for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
such a drastic change. It was amazing.
Right. Yeah. And I do think like I also want people to know that you did have a setback after all that. So after it had almost been 5, 6 months of working together, like things have been good. And then things did get worse again. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, I think it was around month maybe like 5 or like right towards the end of the program, and I was kind of doing exactly what, you know, you had said. I did have like some like minor life stresses going on, and I think that ultimately that's what kind of threw me off. Um, but yeah, it was a setback, and I started to kind of freak out a little, like, oh no, here I'm gonna go right back to where I was. But thankfully, that's why this program was so perfect for me, because I could just message you. You responded right away, and it's just so nice to know that like it wasn't, like going to the doctor where it's, you show up, they give you something, and then that's kind of the end of the relationship until you have to go back again. And it was nice to have that constant contact with someone. And you, of course, reassured me that everything is fine. Like you're not gonna like. I think the thing you stressed was when I first came to you, it took many years for my body to get into that depleted state, and it wasn't going to get back to that state in a matter of a few days. So I just needed to stick with it and trust the process, and everything, of course, did resolve. So you were right
Yes.
again.
Which I'm so glad. I just remember being like, I'm not leaving you now. Like, I know we're almost at the end, but we're not leaving on this note after you were doing so well. So I'm like, I got to keep checking in with her and make sure she's doing okay. And like, yeah, because I
No,
totally
it's
believe that
appreciate.
you would, but yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure and not leave on that note.
No, that was, I mean, again, like so grateful for you and so thankful for that, because yeah, anywhere else it would have just been like, okay, I gave you my recommendations and you're on your own, but it wasn't like that at all with you. I could thankfully still contact you and get your guidance and support. So that was just like invaluable to me.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad. So, yeah. So, I mean, tell us how you're sleeping now and what else has changed.
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much a complete 180 from when I saw you. So it went from like, maybe a couple good nights a month to now maybe a couple bad nights, but I wouldn't even call them bad because it's just kind of like, oh, 5 hours instead of, or 5 or 6 hours instead of like 7 or 8, which, is perfectly manageable. And I honestly don't even notice. It's not like that big of a deal. I still feel pretty well rested. Um, I feel like overall, well, yeah, more sleep, better quality sleep. I'm also falling asleep faster, which is new for me. That had never happened before. I was always like, 45 minutes just staring at the ceiling, waiting to fall asleep. So that was a big welcome change. I also just noticed, like, maybe midway through the program, I was feeling just better overall, like more energy, more mental clarity, um, which was interesting because I think like in your intake form for this program, you ask about other issues that we're having. And for me, I was like, no, it's just asleep. Like everything else is fine. But of course, after months of like taking these supplements and making these changes, you start to realize like, oh, no, I was actually fatigued. I did have brain fog. I did have like maybe some minor like gut issues that I didn't even really realize. So it's like a little bit of like the frog in boiling water analogy, where like just over time things had gradually gotten so bad, and I didn't even realize what it felt like to feel like good, just like normal. So yeah, it's pretty crazy to experience that.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to add?
Um, yeah, well, I'll just say that one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is how like lonely this experience can be with insomnia, because you're awake when everyone else is asleep, and then during the day you just feel so disconnected and detached because you're just so exhausted. And it was just such a difficult thing to deal with. So just knowing that, again, like I had somebody on the other end to contact, um, and you responded so quickly, and everything you said was spot on. It was just so nice to have that support. And I really think that if you can fix my issues, you can fix anyone's, because I mean, I was in such a bad state. And I also think that, your program is like, I know it's a sleep program, but I feel like it's also like a wellness program, really. Like I just feel so much better overall, mentally, physically. So yeah.
Yay. I'm so glad to hear this. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.